Love to hear a Bob White singing his song. See a big buck on a frosty dawn. Watch our kids catch their first bluegill. See them laugh and hear them squeal. We weren't born into it, but it fits us just right. We thank the Father for his guiding light. We knew we were blessed with this kind of living. That's why we want to keep on giving back to farm life. True North farm life. It's a great life. True North farm life.
Hello, True North listeners. It is June the 2nd, 2026. I've got John back with us this week. How you doing, John?
Doing good. How are you?
Man, I couldn't be better. It's starting to turn into them dog days a little bit of summer.
Yeah.
You know, here in Northwest Arkansas, we've hit some 90s this week, and it feels a little better in the water than it does right out in the sun.
Yeah.
But just come from looking at a farm today. Probably one of the prettiest cattle farms I've ever seen in Southwest Missouri, and it's going to be an exciting one. But John, what's been going on in your life lately?
Not a whole lot. Been on a lot of different farms the past couple weeks. Was on another great cattle farm, different one than you're talking about. A lot of backwoods, timber, deer hunting spots.
Nice.
But
Yeah, so, we never know when a certain particular type of buyer is going to come to us. And in John's case, he's got somebody that's looking for maybe several different tracts of land, and he's trying to help them navigate through that and figure out exactly what they want, whether they want something more open as far as pasture or maybe something more wooded that is a little less maintenance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, John, what do you think for a topic this week? What are you thinking?
I've been thinking a lot about backwoods, food plots, whether you don't have enough equipment or you just have the side-by-side. How can you do that on a budget? We talk a lot about food plots. Not everybody has a tractor. So
that's truthful.
Yeah.
Tractors are expensive, and truthfully, not everybody needs one that much out of the year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like owning a boat, right? What's the better than owning a boat is having a buddy that has a boat, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of the same thing with a tractor, although in my opinion, it's kind of one of the keys, when you really start taking that management level to management on your property to a different level, having the right equipment is key.
For sure.
But I understand completely what you mean by that, and so let's just go into some of the equipment and tools that I think that you could use if you don't have access to a tractor. So I would say most people are probably going to have an ATV, right?
Yeah.
A four-wheeler or maybe a side-by-side, but a piece of equipment that will mount up to that ATV that I think is crucial is a spray rig.
Yeah, spray rig.
You
can manage about anything you want to with that.
Right. So you're talking about, if you want to spray to kill everything before you plant. And, I've done this before. I went out in a field and maybe it was fallow, and I kind of, pulled a mower or something behind my side-by-side or four-wheeler, or even weed-eated. Just weed eat the ground as much as I could. Yeah. And then I spray it with glyphosate to kill most of the ground cover. And I typically do this around the time of the year that you should be planting your fall plots, which in our area is typically around Labor Day.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, you come in and then you throw some seed to the ground, which in our area typically is wheat. It's something that if it can grow in the back of my truck, I'm sure
grow on some rocks.
That it's going to grow on some rocks and a little bit of topsoil. So it is probably the easiest kind of throw and grow that I would say that we have in our area. Now, there are other things that you can get into, right, if you want something more long-standing. And what I talk to people about a lot of times is, what is your game eating 365 days out of the year? Now, doesn't mean they're going to come to your plot 365 days, but it means that your plot has desirable food in it every day of the year. And how do you make it that? Well, wheat, if you think about it, just winter wheat, I mean, it's got a little bit of nutritional value, but not just off the charts high, right? You start talking about soybeans, you start talking about clover, you start talking about all them different things. Then you start looking at something that has higher protein and something that you want for your animals. You know, it'd be like us, right?
Yeah.
If we sat there and ate 20 biscuits a day, what would happen to us? You know, it ain't good. You know, we need some protein in our diet,
Yeah.
and a lot of, you know, they're no different really than that. So, you know, wheat is easy, but if you can incorporate things like clover,
Yeah, clover's key.
yeah, and another one that I've kind of been testing a lot here lately is chicory. And chicory, and the reason I like chicory is this, is that sometimes in the summertime, you've got a plot that is starting to get stressed a lot from warm weather, lack of rain, that kind of stuff. Chicory is a plant that has a long taproot, and it goes down in the ground several inches further than wheat would or even clover, and it draws from that. So when you get a drought, it doesn't hit it like it does clover. So remember what I talked about, 365 days a year, right? So when your clover kind of goes dormant and it turns brown and it's less desirable in the summertime, right? What are they eating? They're eating the chicory.
Mm-hmm. There's a food plot company that sells a jug of seed mix. I think it's in quarter-acre batches, and it's a chicory and clover mix. I'm
There
sure
you
there's
go.
multiple brands that make it, but you know, if you just wanted to go do one all-out food plot, there you go.
I planted a food plot back 2 months ago, and it's called Seclusion 360, and it is a chicory clover mix. However, most of the chicory clover mixes that you see is like 80% clover, 20% chicory, right? Well, this one I wanted to see really how well deer did with chicory. So it is heavy on chicory. I would say probably 60% chicory and 40% clover. And I'm probably off on that a little bit on the percentages, but just hear me out. It's there's more chicory in it than any other mix that I've found.
Yeah.
And so I planted that, and let me tell you, now it's early growth, so early growth is always tender growth. It's always very high in nutrition, very palatable. So that early growth, I've had a lot more deer in that plot than any other place on my property. Now, I've got, you know, clover fields that are a foot in clover, and they've been established for 3 to 5 years, and they are going good. But in this particular field, I've seen more game in it so far in the past 2 months than any other field on my property. So it tells me a little bit, not the whole story, right? I've just got a little snippet. We'll see 2-3 years down the road what it's going to look like. But so far, they've really been going after the tender clover and the chicory. I see bites out of a lot of the chicory that's there. And they've been hitting it really, really hard. And that's just one of the things, you know. So the evolution of your farm or your property is not just getting to one thing and just saying, well, that's what I'm going to plant every year.
Yeah.
That's it, right? So that's what I like about having your own piece of ground, right? Is
For
that
sure.
you can try different things. It's like your biggest lab, right? That you can go out there, you can mix a little of this and a little bit of that, and let's see
Yeah.
how it works. And you see how the deer react, the turkeys react, the quail react to it, and how everything kind of works together to form this one great, you know, food plot. You
Yeah.
know? And we talk a lot about food plots, and I like food plots, but there's a lot more to management on your property than
And just
food
giving them
plots.
food. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this past year I experimented a little bit on our place in Missouri with turnip and radish, and then did another just broadleaf field. And then we had 3 clover and winter wheat fields that we always do clover and winter wheat. And then I established 2 new areas that were just grass. And so killed it all off, dished it up, and put in turnips in one of the plots. And man, I grew some big turnips. But we never got cold enough for them to start digging it up.
Yeah, so tell me what happened that year. Did the deer just really not hit it, or what?
Deer hit it. I'd see some bites taken out of a few turnips, but my expectations in that area were better were to see more deer in those sits than I did, and we just see more deer in the clover and the wheat fields.
That's been my experience too,
yeah.
And that's why I was asking you that. Now, there are certain areas, and I don't know for what reasons, but here in Northwest Arkansas, a buddy of mine, we had a lease, and on that lease we would plant turnips every year, and we grew some turnips that were as big as volleyballs.
Yeah,
I mean, huge. I mean, these could have won county fairs, I think. but anyway, we grew some huge turnips, and the deer absolutely demolished them. Every year, you see big bites out of them. Of course, when they start rotting, it stinks. But every year, the deer would come in and just annihilate it. And then I've had properties where I've planted them, and the deer didn't touch them.
Yeah.
Very little. One thing that I have read about turnips is that sometimes it takes a number of years for them to get accustomed to the taste of it. But my thoughts are this. I don't necessarily like cabbage. And if my wife sent me down and said, Chris, you're going to eat this cabbage for every meal for the next 5 years, probably at some point I might develop a taste for cabbage, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I think about that with a deer too. If it takes me 5 years to finally get them on it, to eat it, is it really worth me planting?
I'd rather just plant what they're already eating.
That's right. I would too. I'd rather plant what they already eat, what they already like, what maybe a little bit better for them. And when you look at a turnip, it's a starch, a lot of that, and it's not necessarily a big protein. Well, what else is a starch? Wheat is a starch. Corn is a starch. Now, not everywhere will corn grow very well, and so that's why we plant other things like turnips and that kind of stuff. But hey, something you did mention. You said you planted some kind of broadleaf. What was that?
I can't remember what broadleafs there. It was some mix we bought off the wall at Walmart. We were there one day and we're like, you know what? Let's try it.
So whereabouts did you plant it? Not the particular field, but how big a field was it?
It was a quarter of an acre. And it was already an area so it was right on the fence line between our property and another property. And the deer, they always come running off the neighbor's hillside and come to that section. So I was like, you know what? Let's just throw something right there. Mm-hmm. And if deer start demolishing it, we'll start hunting it. But, the neighbor's property is just a cattle ranch. So we can hunt that fence line. Mm-hmm. I shot a bobcat out of that food plot this year, but no deer.
So how did the deer utilize that plot?
I'd say they were in the turnips more.
Okay, than that. Yeah.
I'd drive through and just be lush as can be and seem like not a whole lot of activity. Mm-hmm. They'd come down and they'd just pass right by it. Mm. And I, when thinking about food plots, I was sitting in the deer stand this year researching something, and I came across just something about food plots and came across this guy talking about having food when nobody else has food, but not just specifically when nobody else has food, whether it's the deer already ate everybody else's food plots or the crops have already been harvested, but having a sizable food plot that you make sure late season when they're needing food, whether it's snow, just cold, no food left, that those fawns from that year, the does are going to bring them back to where they know is food, and then those fawns are going to do that same thing to their fawns. So you're just creating this circle of life of stuff
within your property.
Yep.
That's right. You know, and I'm right there with you. You know, a lot of people, you know, we buy or we start hunting a particular property, right? And we go and we implement something that first year, and then the second year, most of us, the human way, right, is to say, well, man, I wonder what effect I had on everything, right? But you know, there's certain people out there that have done studies, and truly, when you start a good management practice, and I'm talking everything from managing water, cover, food, and somewhat, you know, the age class of animals you're taking, right? There is studies that show that it's 5 to 7 years. Like I've even heard of some people, when they buy a property, their first 5 years they don't even hunt it. They just work on it and develop it, and then after year 5 they start hunting it. Because here's some of that reason is this. Let's just say that you've had a property for the past 20 years that's been owned by this landowner, and let's say he's leased it out, and for the past 20 years you've had people come in there, they've not done any habitat work, they have taken maybe a lot of animals they shouldn't have, right? Maybe over harvesting and harvesting young animals too. And so it takes time to recoup from something like that, and it takes work to build it back. So you think about it, that if you start right now, right, next year's fawns, that doe, if she's getting all the good groceries, she's getting all the water, she's got the good cover, she's not stressed as much, right, all of a sudden that next year's fawn that drops is going to have really everything, because they're going to have all the food, all the cover, but they're going to have that most precious thing when they're first born is mama's milk, right? And it's going to be full of nutritious stuff because you've done the right things, right? You have burned in areas, and it's now creating all these new plant, you know, early successional growth stuff that this deer is going by, and all of a sudden the mineral content on that stuff is really high, and it's getting, just think of this, that deer is getting its daily dose of vitamins. That's what it's really getting, right? With every bite that you just provided for it, where it wasn't in the before. So now it's getting everything that it needs in a daily bite that you have created, and then it's given that precious nutrients to the fawn, right? Now that fawn has to have the genetic propensity to get to be a biggin, right? But also it's got to have the food, which plays a huge factor in you know, overall of how big that it will grow and how quickly that it will grow. And then how long does it take that fawn to become mature? At least 4 years, right? So you're thinking about that. You're really 5 years away, right?
Yeah.
You're 5 years away, especially if you've got some place that's been maybe over harvested. You kind of letting the numbers come back. 5 years that deer's walked through that property and felt at home, and all of a sudden, man, now it's game on. You know, you've learned more about the property. You've set out your game cameras. You know where they travel, all that stuff, and you've done your food plots and all that. Now, personally, I've not been one that's not hunted the property for 5 years, and I probably don't know very many people that has. So I'm gonna be the realist here, is that I start hunting from the day that I get the property. However, I'm very particular. There's been a couple years that I haven't taken anything because, you know, I see potential. You see these deer that are potentially going to be good, but you don't know. I was able to harvest a deer off my farm 2 years ago that I seen him not seen him in person, but I got pictures of him the first year. And the second year I seen him, and I had an opportunity to harvest him, but I didn't feel good about it, so I didn't take the shot. The third year that I was there, I was able to finally get the deal done. But after having that deer aged, he was a typical 10 point, but he was 152, 53 inches, something like that, at 9.5. 9.5 years old. So he never was going to have the potential to get to be that, 170.
Yeah.
And a small portion of the population will have that potential.
Yeah.
To get to 170. I wish every buck that was created was going to be a 170, but it just don't work that way, right?
Yeah. I haven't shot a buck in Missouri. I think I've shot one buck at our place in Missouri, and it was a coal buck. I've just been we've owned it for 4 years now.
Right.
And I've just, for the 4 years, there was one buck I was after, but didn't get him. And then he didn't show back up the following year. But I've just been chasing coal bucks, getting those bad genetics out of there. I got a super messed up 8 point right now. And we've been after him for 2 years, and he keeps evading us.
So let me ask you a question, John. Do you think that you can harvest out bad genetics?
No.
So
now, if you're on a high fence, yeah.
Okay.
But a low fence property, you're always going to have bad genetics. You can improve your genetics, but you're always going to have a buck that throws an awful rack, or maybe he just has a bad growing year. So don't just give him 1 year and expect him to always be a bad buck.
Yeah. I would have to agree with you that, here's the way I think about coal bucks, right? If I'm hunting my property, and what's a trophy to you? Let me tell you what a trophy to me is, okay? Do I want to shoot a 170 or bigger every year? 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's not realistic for my property and my area.
Yeah.
So if I'm not going to shoot a 170 or a mature deer on my farm, and I still want to hunt, right? I don't want to not hunt. Like, I hate that people say, well, I ain't got a 170, so I'm not hunting this year. I mean, come on, man. Are you a hunter or not?
Yeah.
I'm a hunter. I love it. I love time in the woods. I love time to sit there and think about things and reflect and give thanks to the Lord. But let me tell you this. Not every year are you going to have this great shooter that you're going to think about. So what are you going to do? Well, what John said is a perfect example of that, is that you might not have that one buck that you're after, but now you're going to identify that coal buck that you kind of want to take out of the herd, that is maybe not genetically gifted, and he's going to be your challenge for that year, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, this buck's been my challenge for 2 years, and he keeps evading us, but it's like,
go.
He needs to get out of there, because I think he runs other bucks off. He's a very heavy set 8 point. This past deer season, he was a 5x3. But each year prior, he's been, a typical 8 point, but he's super narrow, super tall, almost touching. And, I keep in the back of my head like, man, do I let him go and see if he touches?
Yeah.
But he's got to go. So every farm's going to have a buck like that, whether it's a bully buck or it's just something that doesn't look good. You're like, just get him out of there. I'll chase him, see if I can get him, and I'll let those 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds grow.
Right. Speaking of Missouri, have you heard anything about the new what's come down the pike for licensing?
500 bucks a license?
Yes, sir. I don't think it's been passed yet, but I did hear a summary. I think it's up maybe for a vote or something like that. But I think they're probably going to move to that $500 tag, and I think they're going to move to a $1 limit.
Really?
For Missouri. So we'll see. So if you kill your buck with an archery, you're done.
Yeah.
Right? There's no going back for rifle. We'll see how the regulations. I don't think it's been finalized yet, but there's strong talk about that. Now, if you own, I believe it's 78 or 80 acres or more, you can get the landowner non-resident landowner tag, and you can still harvest 2 animals from your property. 2 bucks.
So it's only non-residents are $1.
Non-residents.
Wow.
Well, they haven't. That's what they're talking
Yeah.
about. I think it'll pass. I think they're going to end up passing it. But non-residents get $1. Now, if you don't shoot let's just say you buy a archery tag, right, which is $500, and then you not successful, and you want to go rifle hunting, you can buy another $500 tag
We still
and go rifle hunting, but you only get one deer. So, it's I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how. But here's what's kind of driving this for Missouri, is that they've seen an influx of non-resident hunters come into the state, to their public lands, to that kind of stuff. The other thing that they're looking at with public lands is having a public land fee. So if you're going to hunt, if you're going to hunt the public lands, there's going to be another fee that you have to pay on top of the $500. So there's a lot of different things there, but what Missouri's trying to balance is they kind of want to cut down on some of the non-residents coming to the state. Of course, they don't want to lose funding, but also they still want the outfitters and the people that own hotels and restaurants and that kind of stuff to still get business and not hurt it in that degree. So there'll probably be some playing with this over the years. It might not be a fine-tuned kind of thing coming out of the bat, but I do think that we will see change this year in the Missouri licensing structure for non-residents.
Yeah, we saw that in Oklahoma this past year. $200 for your license, then $500 for archery tags, $500 for rifle tags, and $500 for muzzleloader.
So if you want to hunt everything, $1,700.
Exactly.
Wow.
But my personal belief on it is, one, yes, the non-residents, increase in that, but I think the reason why we're seeing more non-resident hunters in these states, in Missouri and Oklahoma, is because you got Kansas and Iowa right there.
Surrounding.
When people don't draw, guess where they're going? They're going to northern Missouri, right on the border of Iowa, right next to Kansas. You're going to northern Oklahoma, right next to Kansas. And I think, you've got just as good odds in these other places, because I heard somebody talking about it on a podcast one day, is some big time hunters that, just everything changes once something gets out there in social media. So everybody starts talking about Iowa, it's going to change because now it's on everybody's radar. A lot more people are hunting in those areas.
Right. It's so funny the way social media works with like hunting, how it's changed hunting even, because I don't know. Just me personally, I don't put pictures very much at all on social media of game that I've shot. I hunted several states, turkey hunted this year, harvested birds in several states. Didn't post a single picture, but that's me, and I get it. But I think it becomes, a bragging board too much, to me. It becomes that. But listen, I have no problem going to hunt several states, and I love the sport and the people I meet along the way. But yeah, social media. I guess there's been benefits to promoting hunting as a sport, but in some degree that it just turns into, hey, I gotta shoot this animal so I can put my picture on Facebook, and come on. If that's the mainstay of it, then we've kind of lost track of what it was.
Yeah,
I can remember when I was a kid, and some of you may or may not remember this kind of stuff, but I lived through some pretty cool ages, to where the check-in spot for your deer was a special place. There would be, on opening day of rifle season, there might be 10 trucks lined up there at the local check-in station, and they might stay there for 2 hours so everybody could walk by and look at their deer. And I thought that was cool. I thought that was cool when I was a kid to go by there, and I was like, even if I didn't shoot one, come 9 o'clock, I'm like, Dad, it's time to get down.
Yeah.
I ain't seen a deer by 9 o'clock.
Let's go check in.
We ain't gonna see nothing else, So let's go to the check-in station. So we drive to the check-in station. I just sit there and look at them deer that was there and just admire them. And I was like, why can't I ever shoot one like this? And it was because I was out of the tree at 9 o'clock and out looking at the check station, right? But
I did that same thing except I never witnessed the check-in stations, but it'd be the processor.
Nice.
So we had a ranch that just up the road from our other one in Oklahoma, and sold the big cattle farm, and they put in a deer processor. So we'd go hang out with them. We were buddies with them, and I'd go look to see if not really what was shot, but to make sure none of the deer I was after got shot. So, making sure none of the neighbors shot my buck.
Yeah, I get it, man. I get it. That's a special time of the year, and a special time for honoring the deer, the game, all that stuff. But hey, I want to touch back on something we were talking about a little bit earlier. We were talking about food plots, right? And I don't want to leave this part out. We talked a little bit about hidey ho food plots, kind of stuff like that, and we talked about equipment, right? And so a spray rig is to me, and an ATV is the two biggest tools that you can have for a food plot. Also, you're going to need some kind of seeder, right? I run I believe it's a Moultrie, and it has an electric gate. So I can control the gate from a button, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so if I want it to open just a little bit, I push the 1. So if I'm planting clovers or turnips or something, a real small seed, I'll open it to 1 to where a little bit comes out, right? But if I'm planting like wheat seed, I'll put it on 3 to where that's about the right rate for it to come out, and I drive roughly 5 miles an hour when I'm spraying and when I'm planting. That's kind of my rate, 5 miles an hour. So that is a couple tools that you will need. Now, some they make all these throw and grow things that you can basically go out in the woods, scratch back the leaves, throw it out, and kill a biggin. And I've never seen that work successfully, and here's why. A lot of times, they always talk about putting in this hidey-ho spot that's in the middle of the timber somewhere, Well, what happens? Them hidey-ho spots, what are they not getting a lot of times? What is
Sunlight.
it? Sunlight. That's exactly right. They're not getting sunlight. And what's a plant take to grow? It takes water, nutrients, and sunlight. Okay?
Yeah. Now I kind of think about it as you want to create a hidey-hole duck hunting spot. You want them ducks to come down in the back of the timber. Mm-hmm. Just the same thing as a throw and grow, as a backwoods food plot. Even if you go and fall 4 trees, and you just got a little circle, as long as you can get something to grow and you got some sunlight hitting right there, it's going to grow, and
that's right.
Your odds are better.
And I'll tell you what, when you got all them trees around you, I'll tell you, go out in a field and find a group of 3 trees that are somewhat close together. Okay, out in the middle of a field where there's grass all around it, and then go walk under them 3 trees that's in somewhat of a close proximity. You know what you'll usually find? Bare dirt.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, the reason that is because A, it's not getting enough sunlight, but B, them trees have massive roots that are pulling water from every which direction and nutrients. Okay, just like if you go through and clear timber and you're going to plant a food plot, you better be throwing the nutrients to it, because I promise you it's very deficient, because them trees over the years have been pulling a lot of the nutrients from the ground. So you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
That's why I don't necessarily like a throw and grow food plot in the middle of the timber, is because everything's stacked against you. Mm-hmm. You got the trees pulling the water, you got the trees pulling the nutrients, you got the sunlight blocking the ground. That's why I choose to make my food plots, a little bit bigger in size, not a quarter acre in the middle of the woods, but it might be a half acre. That's probably the smallest that I go on any plot that I do is a half acre. But typically, depending on how much open areas, and we was talking about your farm a few weeks ago, how much open food areas do you have? Do you have 10%? Because that's what I recommend is having 10% of your acreage. So if you've got 140 acres, you should have 14 acres in some kind of productive food.
Yeah.
Right? Clover, beans, chicory, some kind of productive food. And if you're doing your rotation and burning, you're creating even more early successional food that they're going to love. Right? So it's twofold. Food plots are one thing, bedding's another thing, and nesting cover. And then we talk about, having that 10% and if you're not at that, you're probably not giving yourself a good enough chance to properly manage on your property. For instance, if you have 140 acres, you've got 1 2-acre food plot in the north side of your property, where else you hunting? And I mean, don't get me wrong, I hunt places not only in food plots.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, this is what feeds your deer 365 days a year, right? So it's pretty important. And if you got 1 3-acre plot, how about the deer that's on the other side of the property? You think they're walking all the way across that property to get to that 3 acres? No. They're eating on your neighbors, right? So I try to scatter my plots out throughout the property in conjunction to bedding areas, or maybe even where I want to pull deer from other properties. But I try to scatter them out throughout the farm, and there's strategic ways of doing that. It's not just, well, you know what, this is kind of an old field area right here, and we're just going to make a food plot out of it. That's what most everybody does, okay? And sometimes it turns out great, but most time it does not. And the reason is because you put that food plot there because of how easy it was to put there.
Yeah.
Not because it was the best place to put it, but because of how easy it was to put there. Now you got to think about things like, how am I going to get in here and get out without a deer seeing me or smell me? So that's number one. Number two, is this in somewhat of a close conjunction to a bedding area, and do I know where the bedding area is? Because my stand selection is going to be not in between the bedding area and the food plot, because if I'm there, I stand a better chance. Yeah, you might stand a better chance of catching them, but you also stand a better chance of getting winded. Mm-hmm. Mine are usually on the downwind side of the food plot. That's where I usually put my stand locations. Now, there are some times that you can get in and get out, when you've got a crosswind coming in, and you can position yourself in between the bedding and the food, and that's great too. But in most cases, that's what you're going to look at. You're going to look at entrances. You're going to look at where's the right place to put this food plot, and it's not in a quarter-acre hidey hole in the middle of the timber that's never going to grow. I say never. Your success is going to be very limited. Let me just put it that way.
For sure.
I mean, the box stores and social media might tell you, hey, throw and grow, man, it's going to be the way to go,
Yeah.
And for somebody that don't have the tools like a tractor and stuff, I can see where that appeals to you. But do this. Cut some timber. If you need some areas opened up, cut some timber, cut an area, but think about things before you do it. Think about things, well, how am I going to get to this spot without busting the deer out? How am I going to hunt it on the downwind side almost every time? How can I take these trees that I just cut down and maybe position them in a way to where I funnel the deer the way I want them to go?
For sure.
So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to food plots, growing them, putting yourself on the right side of the food plot to where you're going to put yourself in position for the right shot opportunity. And what I love about some of the places that I've had over the years is that, you know, when you can have a blind set up in an area and you can walk into the back of that blind, and let's just say it's just breaking daylight. You can walk in the back of that blind, crawl up in it, and look out the windows, and you've got 20 deer in front of you, and not a one of them spooked. Now, how many people has places like that?
Not many.
But that didn't come by accident.
Yeah.
That come by creating it. Okay, so if you didn't create it, it wouldn't come together like that. So it takes planning, a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, and always before you do anything, think before you do it. And you know, any food plot that I put in, I try to think about where the deer coming from. How am I going to hunt it? How am I going to get in? How am I going to get out? That kind of stuff is the most crucial part of it. But having food plots, having that kind of stuff is great. So, John, if you on your property, what would you plant in a perfect world? And I say perfect world, perfect meaning in your area with your soil types. This, what do you think would be the best thing for you to plant on your property?
Right now, I say just clover, winter wheat, you know, chicory, clover chicory mix, super rocky soil. You know, the turnips did great, but the deer just didn't love them. You know, so, well, go back to what we were doing. You know, just do what we saw the most productive, you know, and focus on that water. You know, we're pretty lucky. We got a great big spring, and they love drinking out of it, and a ton of nutrients in that water. So, you know, focusing on water and that clover, what they were primarily using and choosing to go to this past year. You know, I don't have a drill to drilling beans or corn or nothing. So also our plots just aren't big enough. They'd be wiped.
That's right.
So sticking to that clover.
Right. So, you know, I've had some people ask me before, well, let's just talk about this. With limited tools, not having a tractor, what are you going to do this fall? And you want to plant clover, and you want to have a plot that's going to be 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Here's my recommendation, okay? First of all, you go in and you kill everything. Hopefully the grass is about a foot tall, roughly, and you go in and you're going to wipe it out sometime around the 1st of August. Okay? Then what you're going to do, what I like to do, is I like to go in and mow it as low as I can. The whatever dead grass is there, I'll come in and mow it as low as I can. You got rocky soil, right? So you're probably not going to get too low with it.
Yeah.
But just, you know, I use my zero turn a lot. I'm just telling you, I use my zero turn a lot. But I would go in, put my deck to the highest level, mow the plot completely. Then come Labor Day, I would come and spread a clover mix. And when I talk about a clover mix, I'm talking about it might have 3 different white clovers. I like white clovers. Red clovers can be good too, but white clovers is my go-to.
Yeah.
And maybe a different, you know, Ladino, you know, something other, different types of clovers. And here's why: because they will mature and become very palatable at different times. Maybe brimstone clover. So when you mix 3 of them together, you don't just make them desirable at one time. They're desirable a lot of different times. And there's certain clovers too that are more drought tolerant. So if you're in an area where you get some drought, you probably want to go with some of them more drought tolerant clovers. But clovers do really well in a lot of different areas. Like, I've even had a really bad drought in the summer, and I'm not lying, it looked like something was fried out there. I couldn't find hardly any green. It was all brown in my clover. And then that fall, here come the rains, and boom, It greened right back up, come right back in. It was all good. But when you think about that, the deer didn't have something to eat for probably a month,
Yeah.
maybe a month and a half, right? So let's talk a little bit about this fall. You're going to come in and you're going to plant your clovers at roughly 8 to 10 pounds to the acre of white clover is what you're going to plant. And then you're going to come in and you're going to drag that.
Yeah, and a drag can be anything.
That's right.
You know, my dad, he's a project manager. They're just demolishing a city park.
Yep.
I went and took the chain link fence gate,
Perfect.
you know, to get me a new drag. But let me ask you this, so you don't disc at all when you're establishing a new clover plot?
Well, now hold on. I'm talking about without the tools.
So that's what,
Yeah.
if you got a side-by-side,
Yeah.
you can get a small little disc. You know,
Yeah.
a couple $100.
Yeah. Listen, you can. But in your soil type, you really think you're going to
Yeah,
break that much
not with a
ground?
side-by-side. Not in my...
Okay. So listen, a lot of it depends on your soil type. But I'm saying in limited supply, with very limited supply.
If you
don't
were to
have
buy
a
one
tractor, if you don't have a disc,
Yeah.
if you got a side-by-side, a spray rig, and a seeder.
Yeah.
Them
and
three things.
A cedar can be a little
Handheld.
$20
That's
hand
right.
crank
Can be a handheld. That's right. If you've got them three things, I think that you can make a good plot.
Yeah.
Okay. So you put your clover down. You know the grasses are small. You drug it out, right? Then you're going to go right over the top of it, and you're going to broadcast your wheat at about 100 to 125 pounds to the acre.
Yep.
Some people may say rye, right? Winter rye, that is. Winter rye is good too. It's great. It's probably the most hardy out of all of them. The reason I don't choose to use it is because during turkey season, when I'm turkey hunting out there, that stuff is already waist to head tall.
Yeah.
And so good luck on shooting a gobbler in that plot. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to want to be in it. Okay, so wheat doesn't grow as quickly, but it also doesn't get as tall. So it might get, knee to halfway up your thigh tall, but you're still going to see a turkey's head out there in it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
so that's why I plant winter wheat instead of rye. Now, rye has a lot of good things to, it probably gives back to the soil more than anything, right? It discourages weeds, that kind of stuff. It, when you whatever you do to terminate that rye, you probably going to bush hog it or something. Well, what's that old dead grass going to do? It's going to go right back to the ground, right? And it's going to start making more topsoil for you. That's a good thing. That's a real good thing. But I choose to go wheat because it's kind of in between rye and oats. And I planted oats one year, and I like oats, but here's the deal. We got a really hard cold snap around the 1st of November, and I probably had 20 acres of oats with clover that I had, and then I had 3 acres that I'd planted winter rye in. And the wheat was dead after the cold snap, like yellow. And the winter rye was still green, vibrant, still feeding. So after that episode in our area of southwest Missouri, I said, I'm not going to plant. Now, if I was in Alabama, I might plant oats a lot. But in our area of northwest Arkansas, southwest Missouri, I think wheat and rye are the 2 best options.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So now you've got them. They're eating the rye in the winter, right, or the wheat, right? They're coming to that, but you planted clover in the fall. Now, what's your expectations of that clover in the fall?
First year, it's not going to be the best.
That's right. For that first fall, it's going to grow downward more than it's going to grow upward.
Yeah.
So it's establishing the root system mainly in the fall. So if your thoughts are you're going to be hunting over this beautiful clover plot that you planted in August, September time frame that fall, it's probably going to be green with wheat, but it's not going to have just a whole lot of big clovers in it. Now, fast forward to the spring. Your wheat shoots up and then your clover will explode. It'll be right underneath that wheat, and once your wheat starts to head, you can, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can come in and spray your wheat before it ever heads and kill it, and then you just got clover underneath. Or you can wait till the wheat heads and then just come in and mow it, bush hog it, mow it with your zero turn, and then it terminates. And now you've got beautiful clover underneath it, and that's why I added chicory to my mix, is because when it gets a little drier, I still wanted that something in my plot that's going to supplement when my clover goes a little bit dormant in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think? You think it's a recipe that will work?
I don't think you can get a better recipe, and there's tons of different ways to get a clover field established. And even if you don't have a side-by-side, if you're taking a little backpack sprayer, if you put in a little bit of sweat equity, so you can get a good plot going.
So one thing we didn't talk about very much is nutrients for the soil, right? Most people will go out there and probably not put any nutrients down, or if they do, they're not going to know really what to put down. They're just going to go maybe grab a bag of triple 13 fertilize and throw it out and hope for the best, right? Because triple 13 is the same for everything. 13 parts this, 13 parts that. It's a balanced diet, so to speak, a balance of nutrition that you're feeding them. But I actually killed a plot one time with fertilize.
Really?
Planted this nice plot, and I had a lot of things to do that day, and I said, I'm going to get out there early, and I'm going to go out there and fertilize my plot. And I did, and I got out there, and it was break a day, all kinds of stuff, and I fertilized that plot, and my boots were wet, and stuff getting out of there, and sure enough, if you fertilize your plot when the dew's on, it will burn it. I'm just letting you know. It'll burn it up. So make sure when you're applying fertilizer that it's dry. But what I do in my plots every year, just so everybody knows, is I'm pulling soil samples once a year from my plots. I'm seeing where the pH is, and for a lot of this stuff, like let's talk about clovers, it's pretty pH dependent, right? I can grow wheat in about any pH, but clover, I like to see it between a 6 and a 7. If you're in the 4s or 5s, you're probably going to struggle with growing clover. But if you're in a 6 to a 7, you're gonna be fine with that.
Yeah, and pH levels are heavily overlooked. It's the most important thing.
It is, but it's probably one of the hardest things. I say hardest, like you can buy pelletized lime, right?
Yeah.
And you can spread that, But let's just say that you have a pH in your plot of 4.8, and you get your soil sample back, and let's say your plot is 2 acres in size. You get your soil samples back, and they say, all right, in order to get this to a 7, you need to add 4,000 pounds of lime per acre. So
it's 8,000.
Good luck on spreading that with your hand spreader to spread 8,000 pounds of lime out there. So all I'm getting at is sometimes you need a lime truck, but sometimes when we talk about these small plots, right? How much lime a lime truck holds? 17 tons, 34,000 pounds. So 34,000 pounds, and you only need how much? 8,000 pounds. So what are you gonna do with that other? Say, hey man, you just take it, just go throw it out, get rid of it. No,
just go
and that's why it makes
more.
it hard sometimes, right? And but when you think about it, if you got 10% of your property, now if you got 14 acres and it needs 3,000 pounds an acre, all of a sudden it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Now you got a truck that can spread it.
Yeah, and you can always get a day rental, say.
That's right.
I'm going up to the farm for this day. I'm going to rent a Bobcat skid steer, a tractor. Get a $400 day rental and knock out as much work as you can.
Yeah,
that
and
one day.
if you get it on a Saturday, right? When you got to bring it back? Monday. That's right. So you really get 2 days out of it. And I've been there, John. That's exactly what I've done too. Get that thing, and buddy, I'm putting hours on it. But now they get smarter. They're like, well, you can't put more than 16 hours on it. 'Cause you get it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but No, I'll tell you what, I'll make this short, but as far as the farm goes, my corn is coming up great. My beans are in. I did my first round of spraying this past week to kill the weeds. They're looking great. We're getting awesome rainfall for this time of the year. This week's supposed to be hot, and you know what beans love most? Is hot, muggy weather.
And we're about to get more rain,
and we're going to get more rain, so they're going to be really jumping. I did meet with the Missouri Department of Conservation fisheries biologist at my pond this past week, and I had him come there to look at everything. Like, my pond's on year 2 now, and we talked about what I stocked in the pond, what I've done with the pond, what kind of structure I have. We looked at the incoming water to the pond. We looked at a number of different things. We looked at some of the stuff that's growing around the pond now, like some water willows, which is really good. A little bit of cattails in some areas, which is not bad as long as you control it. And just the overall water quality, he gave me a very high praise, which I was extremely happy with. He said, what he told me, he said this is one of the best 2-year-old ponds that he's ever been to as far as the condition of everything where it's at now. So I felt really good about that. He did give me some good pointers on what to do. I have some areas on my bank that are a little bit thin in grasses on them, and a little bit of that's because there wasn't enough adequate topsoil that was spread in that area, so it wasn't very fertile. So when I planted the grass seeds, some of it took, some of it didn't. So that's an area that I'm going to try to spread a little bit of topsoil there. I'm probably going to have to put in some things to keep it from eroding.
Yeah.
Some of that matting down, that kind of stake it down, that kind of stuff. But I think there are ways that I can get better with my pond. So that's been exciting. Just coming up over the next 2 months, pretty much, is I'm going to hang. It always works out this way. I always end up hanging more stands in the hottest time of the year, right? But I have 2 or 3 more sets that I want to put on the farm for locations this year. Getting a ton these past 2 weeks. Been getting a ton of baby deer pictures. Fawns are on the ground. They're dropping every day. It's just been one after another. Haven't got any poults yet on camera.
We had a group of poults coming down. I wasn't there. Another guy that was up at the farm texted me and said he just saw a hen bring down a bunch of poults down to the water to drink.
That's so cool, man. So, I love to see it, but what I typically see, and I don't know why, but on my property, it's always the first week of July is when I usually see them. And I think it's because my cameras, right, I get a picture of the hen coming first, and then it's just not enough to pick up them little ones afterwards. But anyway, just, it's exciting times this time of year. It's hot, and we're just out on our properties working, trying to make them better. But Chris Hinkle here, John Hunley, man, we're just so proud to have you here joining us at the True North team here at Keller Williams. And we just, if we can help you with your land in any way, whether that's talking to you about it to better your land, because, hey, at the end of the day, being better stewards of the land is the number one prerogative. A sale on a piece of property is just a byproduct of what we do. And so if we can help you in any way, just let us know. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
We love to hear a Bob White singing his song. See a big buck on a frosty dawn. Watch our kids catch their first bluegill. See them laugh and hear them squeal. We weren't born into it, but it fits us just right. We thank the Father for his guiding light. We knew we were blessed with this kind of living. That's why we want to keep on giving back to farm life. True North Farm Life. It's a great life, True North Farm Life.